Hello and welcome to the Shiny Bees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. I'm your host Jo Milmine and this is episode 111, Assimilating New Knitters. Hello and welcome into another episode of the show. I'm Jo. Hello. Hope you're all right. I hope you've been well since last time I spoke to you and been enjoying a little bit of knitting in the meantime. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite subjects, one of my favourite things to do, and that is assimilating new knitters. And I've had a bit of a think about this and around it over the past couple of weeks and sort of broken it down into 5 areas I think we need to address if we are going to assimilate more new knitters. And it's kind of one of my kind of life's work thing to not that I even kind of know what my life's work is, but it certainly feels like it's important to get more people knitting and introduce them to it and let them loose really with creativity and with making stuff. And I mean, can you even remember a time before you knew knitting was awesome? And don't you kind of feel a little bit like we're in on the secret and everyone else who thinks it's just for nanas is kind of missing out on a whole sort of world that they'd never knew existed? And it's a bit mean. It's a little bit mean to keep it all to ourselves, I think. So that's why I wanted to talk about that today and think about the different ways that all of us as knitters, because it is our duty to share the love, how can we do that? What are the things we need to overcome, and how can we make knitting a little bit more sexy and appealing really to people? I know, knitting's on the rise, blah de blah de blah, insert cliched newspaper article here. But is it really and is it are we doing ourselves any favours? Do we have an image problem with knitting on and all these other kind of things that I've been thinking about that I wanted to share with you today, and also get your feedback on it, because you're out there as well on the ground. You're out there assimilating new knitters to the Borg, if you will, and you'll all have different experience that I would love to hear about and find out how you see things in assimilation of knitters. So that's the main show topic for today. And before we get into that, I've got a couple of things for you. Number one, and most importantly, and it makes me hungry every time I think about it, is there has been a bit of a heated fish and chips debate ongoing over in the Shiny Bees podcast community Facebook group. And I've been asking people how do you take your fish and chips? Do you put gravy on it? Basically, I want to know. And I do judge you massively if you don't. We might not even be able to be friends if you don't like gravy, to be honest. I'm only kidding, vegetarians, calm down, I'm still going to be a friend. But you know what I mean? This is a very deeply personal thing for a northerner. And I want to know about all of you as well. Sarah, bless her, Kit popped up and said she puts ranch dressing on hers. Hideous. What? You're an animal. What is ranch? There's blue cheese in it. Ooh. Anyway, that is on going over then. If you're not a member, you can find links to it in the community tab on my website, shinybees.com. And also you can go to Facebook /groups/Shiny Bees podcast community and join us over there. Claire has shared today some fantastic knitting porn from the BBC of all places, because there's a lady doing knitted pole dart characters and selling them at £34 a pop, and they're really popular. Apparently she sold loads. Amazing. They're really good as well. Played right into my little happy random knitted character pattern heart. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But go check it out, very funny. Awesome article there. The other things that are going on in there is I'm doing a giveaway for reviews on iTunes, because I ask you to do one every week and you don't listen to me, basically. So I'm politely requesting if I can give you a prize and do a giveaway for people who've done reviews to the show. The reason for that is the more reviews you get on iTunes, basically the higher up the search results you come and the easier it is for people to find the show. And the more ways we can find new knitters by making information accessible, the better. And podcasts are one of those. I mean, think about before you listen to podcasts and then think about all of the stuff you learned as a result of listening to podcasts. All the techniques, the reviews, the people, patterns, yarns, like it opens up a whole new world. Not to mention like the community aspect and other people who do what you do, because us knitters, we can be a little bit secretive, as I talk about in the show. And it's not always easy to find other knitters, and podcasts are one of the ways that you can connect with other people and find them. And so that's part of what I'm doing as well, is try and get, knitting podcasts further up the hobbies results and get people listening to them. So there are details over in the group. If you hate Facebook or TLDR, basically don't want to watch my little quick video in there, then anyone that does a review before the 30th of May will be put in a draw, and I'll be giving away a couple of prizes that have been collected. You don't even have to give me a positive review. You don't need to blow sunshine up my ass. I don't really care. Be honest. You can even give me a 1-star review and write that I'm not that funny if you want, because someone has. So let's hope they don't win the prize, because I think they're probably not going to really appreciate it that much if they do. But yeah. So go head over there. There's a little video in the group that shows you how to do reviews as well in under 47 seconds on iTunes, because it's not that obvious. Like the button is not that big. Just FYI, UX point of view for you there, iTunes. So there was that. And finally, there is Wooling in Dublin. I am going between Thursday and Sunday, the 24th to the 27th. And if you are going, I would love to cuddle you in real life. So let me know. Send me an email or whatever. And if you see me wandering around, then please do stop me and chat to me and say hello, because I like nothing more than to cuddle my listeners, figuratively and actually. I'm a great cuddler. I'm a firm cuddler. I do like a good squeeze. So you've been warned if you're not into that. I don't do the wet lettuce handshakes. I don't do the wet lettuce cuddles. Just so you know. If you're American, cuddles are hugs. Like, by the way, if you don't use cuddles as a word, it's nothing kinky. Should I put my arms around you, give you a bit of a squeeze, and that's it really. It's in public after all. And I would love to see you. So please let me know if you're gonna be there. So as well. Finally, we're going to go into the topic of the show. I hope you'll enjoy this one. And like I said, this is a conversation opener. It's not just like gospel according to assimilating knitters. I would really love to open some dialogue with you around this and have conversations about how we can kind of assimilate more knitters and what ideas you've got. So without any further ado, my loves, here is the topic of the show. So, assimilating new knitters. Super important topic, as I mentioned in the intro, and something that I'm kind of on a bit of a mish to do. I think more people should know how to knit. I think more people need to know how great it is. And I don't think there's necessarily enough opportunities for people to try it and experience it and find out for themselves. So I've broken my kind of manifesto for assimilating new knitters down into kind of 5 key pillars of assimilation that I think need to be kind of covered. When we talk about getting people knitting, these are: number 1, marketing. 2 is self-belief. Number 3 is the right materials and tools. Number 4, medium and motivation. And number 5, access to decent resources. Hashtag just warning you, I do have opinions in number 5, and I will be sharing them with you. And these are like the 5 key areas that I think need to be addressed when we think about assimilating new knitters. And I've broken each one down into a little chunk for discussion, basically, with you, and to see if my thoughts are right on it. Not there's any right and wrong. They're your opinions, they're your thoughts, it's your experience. Like, people can't argue with that, obviously, but it's good to share all of these things and come up with new ways of doing stuff and new ways of getting new knitters. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this episode today. So, number 1, marketing. Okay, and you would think, like, why do we need to market knitting? Like, it's not like a product or anything. Like, why does it need to be that clinical? And marketing is just about communication. That's what marketing is. It's communicating features and benefits of anything. You market yourself when you go for a job. You market a product. You market a place. Everyone is always marketing, and everyone is always selling or being sold, and ultimately we want people to be sold on knitting. So they'll try it and they'll get involved and they'll enjoy it. Again, selling is just solving people's problems. It's not something that's like dirty and sleazy. It's just a way of solving someone's problems. People like to buy. And we need to, as knitters, be selling the concept of knitting to other people who don't knit, and also marketing knitting as something that is worth doing. So, addressing the elephant in the room, knitting has got an image problem. Knitting has got an image problem because when you ask the average person what they think about knitting, it's almost always the case that they will say, it's for nanas, it's for old people, it's what you do in a nursing home, it's what you do when you've got too much time on your hands, it's for old people or pregnant ladies. That is who knitting is for. And it's in no way helped by really cliched and stereotyped coverage of knitting in pretty much everything, whether it's the press, whether it's the news, whether it's a book or a story, whether it is a film. It is very often the case that that knitting is portrayed in a very stereotypical manner, and that manner is it's only for old people or for pregnant ladies generally. Almost always a nana that's knitting. And we know it's not just for nanas. It's not for nanas as well, but it is for everyone. And the problem is when that perception that it is only for nanas is portrayed so often, and that's what people say. That's what they believe to be the case because the marketing is not there. The marketing is saying knitting is for nanas, knitting is for old people, knitting is what you do when you're nearly dead, and knitting is for pregnant people. And if that's all you see, that's all people know, because they don't know any different, they don't have access to any different information. And the other aspect to that, because I could blame the media for the woes of knitting and not enough people being able to do it, and that would be all kind of convenient, but it isn't just a one-sided thing. And the problem with knitting, or the problem with knitters, all of us, not me so much, because not that I don't have problems, but I don't actually care what anyone thinks. Knitting is generally something that is done in secret. It's not something like running where you see people out on the streets all the time doing it. People generally don't do it out and about. Unless you're a knitter with a capital K and then you don't give a monkeys, like me, not many people do. There's a lot of secret knitters around who only do it at home where other people can't see what they're doing because there's some kind of shame around people seeing you knitting. Hashtag knitting as a marketing problem. And the other thing, kind of part of that is that people make comments to you in public. And I found this to be a thing. I do it anyway, I don't care, as I say, but when you knit in public, you open yourself up to similar kinds of comments and criticism of what you are doing, in the same way that people feel like they can come and give you parenting advice, unsolicited parenting advice, or that they can start touching you once you become visibly pregnant. It's kind of the same thing, I find, that people come over to you and they'll be like, you're doing that wrong. Or my grandma used to knit it this way. Oh, you knitter, are you? Oh, no, but my grandma, like 50 years ago when she did it, she didn't do it like that. She didn't use those pointy sticks. What's that cable thing? And they come and say silly things to you in the same way that people say silly things to you about your children, or about the fact you're pregnant. And that doesn't really encourage you to get your knitting out in public. People stare. People do stare. I've found it can be quite an effective way of getting rid of weirdos on trains because I have one of those faces that attracts weirdos. I don't know why they like me, but they do. And they want to come sit near me and then they want to talk to me. And I don't want to be talking to you on the train. I want to be doing my knitting. And I find that if I have my knitting out and I spread things out a little bit, it tends to stop people sitting near you, which is helpful and useful. But this is where it comes back to that marketing issue. Like, how do we make knitting desirable and communicate the benefits of knitting to people? As another example, think about a Skoda. Like when I was a kid, it wasn't that long ago in fairness, I'm only 35, but when I was a kid, Skoda, right? Skoda was known universally as being a really crap car. It was a lemon, it was like a Lada, Skoda, rubbish cars, break down all the time, nobody wants them. Terrible image problem, and as a result, you just didn't really see them anywhere. Fast forward to now, Lada's still not so much, in fairness, but Skoda has had somewhat of a resurgence. Like they reformed all the marketing, like they changed all of the brand image, and lots of people have them now. It's not seen as being like a bad car to have anymore. It's not seen as being unreliable and unfashionable. And they have some quite cool models, and people are getting into it again because they changed the way they presented themselves. And I feel like knitting needs to do that. And you can cry, put your hands up, throw your hands in the air and tell me about the great work that Pom Pom are doing and about Loop and about all these trendy, fashionable yarn shops that we've got and Ravelry and blah blah. But let me tell you, the number of knitting shop owners that I work with personally that have customers that come in their shop that have never heard of Ravelry. Tons of them, and they're already knitters. So you can't just place everything at the doorstep of one or two independent trendy magazines, or your Brooklyn Tweeds or anything else that are trying to make it fashionable and accessible, and at the doorstep of Ravelry, and expect the general public to find those things if there are knitters who actually bloody knit who don't know about those things. And yes, it is a thing. It is absolutely a thing. So knitting needs to reform its marketing and it needs to make itself more trendy, more accessible, and more for everyone if we are to hope to assimilate more new knitters. I'm on a V. So, number 2, self-belief. This is a massive thing in teaching and learning. It's a massive thing generally, and it's a massive thing for knitting. Let me consult my notes because I've gone on to page 2 for this. And it comes back to that conversation that I mentioned before that you have with people out and about. Because if we're out there more, if more people are seeing young people knitting, if more people are seeing it round and about, if more people see that it's not just something that people did in the olden days or when they had no money, if people see the cool stuff you can make, that all helps to change the image of knitting and make it more desirable, because that's what it needs to. It needs to be desirable for people. And the kind of conversations that you have with people, and you will have been there if you've knit in public or if anyone's even found out you knit, you will have had these conversations and you will have heard some of these phrases before. Oh, I could never do that. Oh, that looks really complicated. I tried it when I was a kid and I was hopeless. Dude, you didn't drive a car when you were a kid and you'd have been hopeless at that. So why are you still using this as an excuse now? I don't really know, but okay. I don't have the time / patience / concentration for knitting. It looks really hard. OMG, how do you do that without looking at what you're doing? Like, she's not... Dave, have you seen her? She's not even looking. She's not looking at what she's knitting, Dave. Alan, have you seen this girl over here knitting? In whatever local accent. That obviously being my local accent. Again, it looks really hard. It's like anything else. These are the things that people say to you, and these are the ideas that they have in their head. And it is like teaching anything. You have to bridge the gap between curiosity, because if they weren't curious, they wouldn't be asking you about it and they wouldn't be talking to you about it. So they're obviously curious, and curiosity is the first step to learning. Right, but how do you bridge that gap between curiosity and ingrained beliefs about what they are and aren't capable of? That they might have had since they were bloody 7 and the blind Auntie Enid, left-handed, tried to teach them knitting. Like, they could have had these beliefs for a very long time. Because quite often people do try to teach children to knit. Probably a bit too early. Probably with the wrong stuff, probably the wrong projects, as I'm going to come on to later on. And these are things that you remember forever. In the same way that I knew that I was only ever going to jump off the 3rd board at Wigan International Pool because it was just too scary. And the 2nd board was enough for me. I only had to jump off the 3rd board once to believe I never wanted to jump off it again. And how can you bridge that gap? How can you make it so they feel they are capable of achieving the knitting? It looks really hard. I could never do that. I tried it when I was a kid and I was hopeless at it. How do you do that? Now, as an aside, whenever anyone asks me about knitting, whenever anyone's like, oh, you'll have to teach me sometime, politely, I grab the moment and I do it there and then. And I let them knit on my project. Probably not going to let them knit on a Boo Knits, I'll be honest with you, but I almost always when I'm in a situation where I'm going to see people out in public, I've got something that's easy to knit, because that's what you take out in public, right? I've got something that's garter stitch, stocking stitch, whatever, that is dead simple, that is easy to knit. And I'm like, okay, I'll show you now. Oh, I can't knit on that, I'll spoil it. Well, if you do it wrong, I'll just pull it out. Like, I can just go backwards and fix it. I can fix I've been knitting a long time. I can fix all the mistakes because I've made them myself. Again, belief. Come and knit on my thing. Let me show you now. It's dead easy. It's only one stitch at a time. That's all you need to know. It's one stitch at a time. In, round, through, off. That's it. Watch again. In, round, through, and off. One more time. You tell me what to do. In, round, through, and off. Okay, you have a turn. You show me now. And that's it. And that is all I get them to do is just a basic stitch because it's about the belief. If they do the first stitch, they'll believe they can do the other stitches as well. They will. But you've got to give them something quick, an easy win, on something they don't believe they can do. They don't believe they can knit on your project because you're a really good knitter and you're not even looking what you're doing. But if you can make them do it, the belief is there straight away. And then the curiosity takes over again because they believe they can do it. And it is, I get really opinionated about education, and I think school sets people up to be afraid of failing, afraid of getting things wrong. And then when you get to being an adult and you're reluctant to try things because it's been ingrained in you for so long that you've got to get the answers right. And it's about getting the results, and it's about getting this on your SATs, and it's about getting this GCSE, and it's about going through the machine. And you actually lose the whole point of what it is, which is learning, like learning how to learn. Rather than passing things just for the sake of passing an exam. And that's why adults can be harder to teach sometimes. So it's about getting that belief there as a kind of an aside, as a top tip. So going on to number 3 then. Right materials and tools. How many times have you changed your knitting needles because you don't like the way that the join is between the cable and the needle? How many times have you stopped knitting with DPNs because you find them too fiddly and you want to knit magic loop because you always use cable needles now? How many times have you gone, I don't want to, knit these pieces flat. I want to knit them in this other way because it's better. It doesn't hurt my hands. It doesn't make my fingers tired. I knit continental because I do it this way. I knit English. I knit English style, but I hold the needles in a Scottish way, but I knit the English style. That's how I knit. I know it's not the fastest way, but that's how I knit. That's how my grandma taught me. She's Scottish, so that's the way I knit. But there's different materials, there's different needles, there's different techniques, different ways of holding things, and everything is different for everyone else. And the problem with teaching knitting and assimilating knitters is this. People decide they want to go and learn to knit. They go to eBay and find the cheapest kit they can find. It comes with crappy plastic needles, squeaky acrylic yarn, and a badly written pattern that's printed on the cheapest paper possible with the least number of instructions possible by someone who's probably not even a teacher, so they don't know how to break it down properly. They just want to turn a profit on some knitting kits, and then they try and knit it, and then they fail miserably, coming back to self-belief number 2, and then they give up because the experience is not there. They don't have the right resources, which we'll come on to at number 5, but they also, knitting is a tactile thing, and you want things that feel good in your hands, and it needs to feel comfortable and ergonomic. For something that's a repetitive activity you're going to be doing, needs to feel like you've got control of things and that the yarn isn't always slipping off the needle or it doesn't feel hard in your hands. And that's why I think a lot of people don't go past that initial curiosity as well, is that they get something that is the wrong equipment to start with, and therefore they can't enjoy the experience. So as an example, my dear friend Lee used to knit when he was younger, was really good at it and quite confident. So we've got number 2 nailed, right? And I've sold him number 1 because he thinks I'm cool. So he wants to knit 2, right? So 1 and 2 are covered and we come on to number 3. And he's like, I should just get some yarn. And I always say to people, no, don't get some yarn. Let me buy you some. Let me get some for you. Because if they go down the market and they go to the acrylic emporium in Wigan Market, for instance, they're only going to get acrylic and they're only going to get the cheapest plastic needles. They're not necessarily going to get the nicer stuff that makes it feel good. Now, I'm not saying they need 20 quid a skein BFL silk. And I didn't send him that, actually, because he's got to work his way up. But what I did do is he was talking about... they've got a lot of appointments they're going to be needing to go to, and he wanted to do something with his mother-in-law, and she's a knitter, and he wanted to make her this blanket. So I said, tell me your colours, I'll send you some yarn. So I picked out, because there's going to be him and his wife and his daughter, they're all going to do it together. I picked some out Addy lace needles, so again, not the cheapest needles that you can get. The circular, so I know he can do straight knitting and he can do stuff in the round when he gets to that later. They feel nice in your hand, they're nice and pointy, so they're easier to get through the yarn. You know, you don't get as much any of the splitting and stuff like that. And then I got West Yorkshire Spinners, so I got some Blueface Leicester, 100% Blueface Leicester yarn. Now I could have gone for the Airedale, right? Fantastic yarn. My mother-in-law's knit stuff for Sammy out of that yarn and it's bloody indestructible. The acrylic blend felted and that didn't when my mum washed it. Like, it is good yarn. But it's not the softest yarn. That's why it has the properties it has. And I was like, nah, I don't want that because it's going to be for his mother-in-law. It needs to be nice and soft, right? Let's go with the BFL. I know that's going to wear well. I know it's going to feel nice to knit. It comes in some nice colours. It's not going to be that hard. Superwash not going to be that hard to look after. But it's going to be better than getting some acrylic that, you know, some acrylic stretches and goes funny and you kill it and you wash it. And let me get that. So the reason for that is because I want him to do it. Like, I want all three of them to do it. Because when you're at an appointment, as you know yourself as a knitter, if you're anywhere waiting, you grab your knitting, you can just sit there. If you're a bit worried about things, you can just sit there. So when I go to haematology, I hate blood tests, hate needles, and I've got to go and get them all the time now. And I get quite anxious about it. I don't like needles. I don't like the thought of needles. I like the whole, I can't look. I can't even see them getting the packets out. Like, it makes me lightheaded. So I take my knitting. And that calms me down. That's one of the reasons a lot of people start knitting is because they've got a medical condition and they end up in waiting rooms all the time. Super handy. Like, it's something productive you can do. It's relaxing. It takes your mind off it. And, you know, NHS being what it is, waiting times are long when you've got an appointment. Like, that's really useful. And what you want is something that people can try and carry on with. So that's what I do when I get yarn for other people, is I make sure it's decent yarn, decent needles, and just say, look, if you decide you hate knitting, please send them back to me because they're not the cheapest ones, and I can give them to someone else if you don't like it, you know. So there are ways of doing that, and I appreciate not everyone's budget will stretch to that, but it's not like I give out free knitting kits to everyone that I meet. It's just every now and again, as you know, as a gift to help people out who are super keen. So that, right materials and tools, if we're going to get more people knitting, if we're going to assimilate everyone to the knitting bog, then we have to be using a variety of needles and tools and yarns, and we need to be finding the right yarns and needles for the people that we're teaching. So number 4, medium and motivation. Again, I have ideas about this because I've been teaching for a while. Why does every bugger who teaches anyone to bloody knit, be it in school or anywhere else, start people off with a bloody Doctor Who scarf? Right, they're massive. Absolutely massive and boring as hell. I started off with a Doctor Who scarf. I got as far as it being big enough to be a hot water bottle cover. Had to change colours 15 times before I got bored of it, and it got thrown there, and eventually I made it into a hot water bottle cover. Like, a Doctor Who scarf is a massive thing to start off with, and everyone's like, yeah, but it's dead easy. It's the same stitch over and over again. It's got plenty of practice. Well, yeah, you do. But I mean, how long before you get that buzz of the finished object? It's probably going to be years. I guarantee you. Tweet me, send me a message on Instagram, right? How many of you have still got the first scarf that you knitted that isn't even long enough to be a scarf? How many of you have got it? Because I bet you there's a ton of you. It's a thing. It's a thing people do. They never finish it. And that's not good for motivation. And when you're learning a new skill, you need to be motivated. You need to really want to get to that end result because, it'll all be worth it in the end. Just keep going, because when you get to the end, it's going to be worth it, you know? And is a Doctor Who scarf worth it? I'd argue not. When you're going to go buy a new scarf, right, you go and look for a nice scarf. Nobody buys Doctor Who scarves. Nobody sells Doctor Who scarves. Nobody goes looking for a garter stitch scarf, because garter stitch is ugly, man. It's ugly. Doesn't look nice. And why? Why try and get someone into an art, a craft like this with a really ugly project. Like, it doesn't make sense, but it happens all the time. It stresses me out a bit, as you can tell. Right? What we need to be doing when it comes to the medium and the motivation, and by the medium I mean what you're knitting, and the motivation is why you're knitting that thing. Like, we need to marry up, I think, 3 things. Number 1, a quick win, because that comes back to point 2, which was self-belief. If you get a quick win, you get that feedback mechanism going, you get that reward going, people are going to want to carry on doing it. That's human nature, reptilian brain. We need a reward. Number 2, the complexity of what you're knitting. Okay, it needs to be accessible. Yes, it needs to be not that hard for them. And yes, there needs to be repetition to give people the chance to practice the rudiments, the basics. But also in with that is the desire for the finished end result, the end project that you get. Like, is their desire for a Doctor Who scarf big enough for them to knit for the amount of time that it's going to take them to do it and knit the same stitch? Are they really? Because if not, then we need to be changing the project to something smaller, like an iPod cover or a hat or something, a smaller canvas for that quick win to get them addicted, to get them wanting to learn more, to get their confidence up. So, they're my thoughts on medium and motivation. I don't think I need to explain that anymore, because there are lots and lots of things you can progress onto if you just get past that initial hurdle of the first project. And there are lots and lots of ways that you can break down bigger things into smaller things to get that quick win result before people go on to a bigger project, like a miniature sock, and going through the motions of knitting a tiny little sock. So you do all of the techniques on a little canvas, and then you can commit to that bigger one with more confidence and with the knowledge that you've got, knowing you're going to get that end result, even though it will be more work, knowing you can do it and having the confidence and the skill to do it. There are ways of doing this for all different projects, but my argument is we should kill the Doctor Who scarf. Basically, death to the Doctor Who scarf when it comes to teaching knitting. And number 5, access to decent resources. I'm going to put it out there and say most YouTube videos on knitting are crap. Most of the tutorial videos on YouTube for knitting are crap. They are. They're badly lit, they're taught too fast, or they've got daft props in them. I've seen a raft of videos recently where they're trying to make it all artistic and all flat lay, and like, there's a place for that in advertising. I would argue that if it gets to the point where you're trying to engineer a shot so you can fit a pot plant in there, and then you can't actually see the bloody knitting, what you're actually supposed to be learning about, then you're doing something wrong. And I'm coming at this from a teaching point of view, right? Styling is one thing, and I'm not saying use the ugliest things necessary to teach someone, but utility, form is one thing, but the function here is what we need. We're trying to teach someone a skill. We're not trying to show a beautiful picture. We're teaching them a skill, and therefore the emphasis for that needs to be on the skill. I get really frustrated with YouTube videos, and yes, I know they're free, and yes, let's all be grateful that there's something out there, but think about it from a new knitter's point of view. If you actually can knit and you go and you look and you're like, oh, this tutorial's like really confusing, they do it too fast, they they don't break it down enough for you to understand what you're doing. And we know what we're doing. Like, what chance has anyone else got if they don't? Now, there are some notable exceptions to this, because I did say most, I didn't say all. Very Pink does some awesome tutorials. Really solid, good tutorials with good notes, good camera angles, shown correctly, good colours of yarn, good contrast, big enough needles, the works. But the vast majority of resources are crap. A lot of Learn to Knit books have terrible, ugly projects in them in ugly yarn. Again, motivation and medium. If you want people to do things, you need to give them the motivation and the medium. Nobody wants ugly hats in ugly yarn. They don't. So it's about, I think, as as knitters, finding ways to document who are the good resources, really, or create our own resources that really do tap into focusing on teaching the skill rather than aesthetics or using yarn that you've been given by a company, or getting as few pages printed in a book as possible because it costs money to print extra pages. And I find that a lot of the independent books, in particular, independent knitting designers who are producing books, have the facility, because it's their choice, because they're not being told what to do by a publishing company. They can choose to put more techniques in there, and they can choose to expand the techniques section to make it really thorough and appealing to people. But most independent knitting designers are not doing basic books. Most of them are doing more complicated, more interesting things than you would find necessarily in a book. And books can be hard because you only get certain pictures and you miss transitions between pictures, and if you don't learn that way, if you can't carry on the rest of the thing in your head as to what's happened in between them, again, it can be quite confusing. But most of the time, if someone's learning it, they're not going to go to an independent designer and pay top whack for a book. They're not, because they want to do it the cheapest way possible because they're just getting into it. And then you go back to your eBay kit, crap instructions, no videos, no real help, crap needles, squeaky yarn. Nobody's a winner. So, to summarise, I think there are 5 pillars, 5 things we need to address if we are going to assimilate everybody to the knitting board, which is my heartfelt desire to do. Number 1, marketing. Knitting has an image problem and we need to solve it. It's not just for nanas, and we need to make it accessible and appealing to everyone if we want people to try it. Number 2, self-belief. People need to believe they're capable of doing it. People often have long-held beliefs about knitting and that the fact they can't do it because someone tried to teach them when they were too young, using the wrong techniques. And we need to change that and help them believe that they're capable of doing it before they're willing to try it. Number 3. I can't remember what number 3 was now. Can you remember? Right materials and tools. Just kidding, checking you're listening. We need to be giving people decent tools and decent yarn to start with, not the cheapest, crappiest stuff, because it doesn't work. It doesn't feel good in your hands, and knitting is a tactile experience. Number 4, medium and motivation. Death to the Doctor Who scarf when it comes to teaching knitting. Quick wins coupled with the right complexity level and the desire for the finished end result equals knitting success. That should probably be some kind of meme. Move over EZ, Joe is in the house. And number 5, access to decent resources. We need decent learn to knit resources that are done properly, using the right kind of techniques so that people can pick up the skill quickly, build up that confidence, get that quick win in the right medium with the right motivation, and become a lifelong knitter. So there you go. There are my kind of 5 pillars of knitting world domination via the medium of assimilating knitters to the Borg. And I would love to hear your opinions as well, because I've talked very passionately about this. And please don't mistake my passion for being ranty or not being an opener for a conversation, because it absolutely is. I think if we are going to get more people knitting and more people trying it and welcome them into our world that we know is ace, that we know how good this is, then these are the conversations we need to be having, and we need to be sharing our experience and sharing the best resources to make it as easy as possible for people to join in. And I'm dying to hear your experience on this, so please do get in touch and tell me. Hop over into the community and let me know. You can tweet me, email me, whatever you like, but definitely, and if you want to use this as a prompt to do your own blog post or whatever, then do send me your thoughts on it. And I don't care if you disagree with me. In fact, I like it when you do, because it helps me to think, right? It's all right having my opinion on here, and if you agree with it, great. But if you've got another opinion, I always want to hear them, because that's how you learn, from listening to other people's opinions and their experience and taking the bits that you want and moving forward with those. So yeah, that's all we've got time for today, I'm afraid. Or you might be glad. You might need to go and have a little lie down in a darkened room by now, after me orating. So heartfelt in such a heartfelt way. Like I'm literally losing my words now. I've literally run out of words now. So I will let you go. But I hope you will have a wonderful week, and I will speak to you all soon. Cheers. You've been listening to the Shiny Bees podcast. Full show notes for this episode can be found at shinybees.com/111, and you can find me on all social media pretty much as @shinybees.